Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Prime Property Finance Podcast. My name is Mark and this week we are joined by Hannah McCartan. Hannah, hiya, how are you?
Hello, Mark. Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. And thank you for welcoming me on your podcast.
Pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us. So, today's podcast is a varied one. We've spent a bit of time now just chatting around the sorts of things we're going to talk about in this podcast, this episode. But I think the best place to start is just with a bit of your background. Do you want to sort of introduce yourself and give us a whistle-stop tour of your career to date?
Sure, yeah, I would love to. So, I started out in lettings back in 2001, 2002. It was such a long time ago. I can't remember exactly when. And in 2006, I set up my own letting agency, McCartan Lettings. So I am all things Welsh lettings. I have been through all of the pain and change that landlords have gone through as a landlord myself as well. I've had an Airbnb company, so I understand the short let market as well. But yeah, my passion is really very geeky, really, all things Welsh lettings legislation. But my passion is where I can help landlords and letting agents do the how-to about all the legislation. So there's one thing about knowing the legislation, but how do we actually put that into real life scenarios? And make our lives easier around what we have to do. So that's really where I'm at now.
Yeah, fab. Awesome. And also Rent Smart Wales, do quite a bit with those guys as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit around your role there?
Yeah, so that was a mildly interesting story. I was sat in a Rent Smart Wales training day on the Renting Homes Act, and having already read through the legislation twice, I was then actually invited by the trainers to say, well, if you know all of this, do you actually want to come and train other people? I was like, oh, go on then. And again, I think that's where it kind of fueled my passion for helping landlords and letting agents understand the legislation and how to put it into practice. So I am a consultant Rent Smart Wales trainer. So every kind of couple of months, across the whole of South Wales up to Aberystwyth, I'll be in a room of letting agents and landlords for the day, and I get them trained on their license, whether it be a renewal or a first-time landlord or first-time letting agent license. So getting them to grips with the basics by doing that as well. Yeah, I'm busy.
Okay, sounds it. So that's good. So we've got plenty to talk about, that's for sure. So on that note, we'll try and keep it succinct as best we can anyway. So letting agents, we deal with, as finance brokers, deal with a lot of landlords. In fact, that's a huge part of our business. And I guess we sit on the side of the fence where we hear landlords ultimately criticize or moan around letting agents. And there's a general feel, certainly when you look in the Facebook communities and those sorts of communities, there's this sort of anti-letting agent sort of rhetoric that seems to float about. So I thought it'd be really useful really to just focus on what letting agents do, the pros and cons, some of the challenges they face as well, and that. So I guess the first question is, what is it that a letting agent actually does?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question to start with. So the letting agent's role is really to support the landlord. The landlord is the client. The landlord is the one instructing the agent to act as an agent for them. The landlord is still responsible for the compliance of their letting, but they are instructing an agent, a third party, to come in and either just set up a tenancy for them or a contract here in Wales, or actually then take on the whole management, so the full management service. Yes, letting agents have a duty of care, obviously, to the contract holders, but ultimately the client is the landlord, and we are working to do the job for them as being a compliant and proactive landlord on their behalf.
And I think the key thing that you mentioned there is the landlord is still responsible, which I think many see it as, I've instructed an agent, there's all the responsibility, you need to run this portfolio or this property for me. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think most people don't, if you don't have a grasp of all the legislation, you're gonna, and you have maybe one buy to let, you're going to hand it over to a letting agent and go, do you know what? I don't really want to know about any of this. So you just take it on for me. And hopefully you'd have a good relationship with that person, that letting agent, and you understand that they're going to act in your best interest at all times. But ultimately, the law does state that the landlord is responsible. So if that letting agent does miss a gas safety certificate renewal or doesn't submit the deposit within the 30-day time frame, then ultimately it does come back on the landlord. And unfortunately, we do hear instances of this happening. But my experience of working with my fellow colleague in letting agents is the majority of letting agents are on there. But I think that's where we hear these bad rumors and bad stories on Facebook and other platforms, is when things go wrong, which are kind of really the smaller element of letting agents. But it is key for landlords to understand that when they buy a property to let or inherit or whatever, that they will always be responsible for it, basically.
Yeah. And we'll come on to the daily activities that a letting agent will take. But I just want to just stick on that point for a second. So I just, the good thing, I guess, is if something like that is missed, like a gas cert or what have you, and something happens where there should have been that relevant piece of compliance in place, I guess that's what insurance is for, right? So professional indemnity and that sort of stuff. So I get that there is a recourse there in that event, whilst it shouldn't have happened, and these things do happen. It's life, but there is a recourse there.
Absolutely, and that's a positive thing about why we have Rent Smart Wales here in Wales, is because all letting agents must have client money protection insurance, have professional indemnity insurance, and also be part of a redress scheme like the Property Ombudsman. So it's got as much protection as you can have, really, for the client, for the landlords there is some sort of recourse there. And again, these agents are going to be audited every 5 years as well, to make sure that these certificates and insurances are always kept up to date. So there is sort of Big Brother looking over us, whereas the English letting agents don't have that yet.
Yeah. Yet.
So, yet.
And that's really good. And I don't want to dwell too much on the negative side of things at all. But I just think it's important to cover that off. And thanks for doing that. So moving on to then letting agents and the day-to-day side of the things, assuming everything runs as it should. Do you want to just chat us through what that would look like typically?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it is really admin heavy at the end of the day, especially with all the new compliance that we have to now adhere to. But it's also about relationship building. So it is spending time on the phones and trying to get as many quality leads through from potential applicants as possible, weeding out the ones that aren't. We're then looking at tech and researching into that. How can we be better efficient while still giving a personal service? There was actually a friend of mine posted on Facebook the other day saying, what's the most random thing, you do as a letting agent? And, the conversation then that happened, it is dealing with the random and most bizarre situations that, it's about time, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's taking on the responsibility of dealing with a problem and finding the solution as quickly and as efficiently and cost effectively as possible for our landlord client. Whereas a landlord, as a self-managing landlord, might be struggling with dealing with a bit of maintenance because they're working 9 to 5, 9 to 8, whatever, and then got a family to deal with, or maybe a poorly parent as well to deal with. There is life going on, and then you have this maintenance issue. Well, actually, a letting agent's role is that, we will keep going to get access, to get that gas safety certificate until the bitter end. We don't just go, oh, we tried 3 times, we're just going to leave it. We have to see it to the bitter end and keep our client informed as well of what we're doing and the efforts that we're making to keep them apprised of the situation. So, yeah, I think my weirdest one was we had a very challenging tenancy. So this was, probably 15 years ago or so, where we had international postgraduate students in a very nice house down Males, and they couldn't really communicate with us really what the problem was. They just kept saying there are monsters in the garden. Well, imagine being a landlord, getting a text message at 7 o'clock at night going, I've got monsters in the garden. You're going to go, whatever. But we had to see it through. We've had this maintenance report come through. We have to see it through. And to be fair, it did take us about 3 weeks because we couldn't understand. And we did property visits and we couldn't see anything abnormal at all. But what it transpired was that the tenants was from Saudi Arabia and they had never seen a molehill before. So in the night, the molehills were appearing and they're like, there are monsters in the garden. They couldn't understand what it was. But we got there in the end. And that was the main thing, that we had to see it. Well, we had to see it through. We needed to know what these monsters were, right? So although that sounds quite sort of fun and interesting, it is taking all of the landlord's time-consuming conversations and problem solving and taking that on board. They will then get to hear about it, and yes, it will be their problem. They might have to pay some money to get things resolved, and it might be a bit expensive. But ultimately, we've got the solution for them, and that's what you pay for. Is you value your time. You haven't got the time to spend managing your property, and we take care of that for you as letting agents.
And I guess the point there is that if you were not full-time looking after your properties, which most landlords aren't, I think it's only 10% of the population are actually of the portfolio. Sorry, the landlord population are actually 10 or more and use that as a full-time position. The other 90% of the 2.5 million landlords are part-time in nature. Would be that it took you guys 3 weeks to figure it out. It probably would have taken someone who's answering messages, hasn't got the time to make the visits, etc. Probably double that, plus some frustrated tenants. I can imagine that could have got quite easily out of control to resolve what is a seemingly straightforward thing because of a breakdown in communication and just not having the time to give it the attention it perhaps needed. Because, yeah, as you're right, you'd look at it and go, what are these guys on about? Monsters in the garden. How serious should I take this before it becomes an actual issue? Yeah?
But they were scared. We had to take it seriously. They were really scared.
and I guess whilst that is unusual, it's not as black and white as a burst pipe, is it? And nothing in life is as black and white, or very few things are as black and white as that's broke, fix this. There's usually a thing that comes with it. So that's really interesting. And then in addition to that, we've got the compliance landscape, and that's changed considerably. We've got the Renters Reform Bill also due to come into effect. That's the word I'm looking for, shortly. I guess the other challenge then is about keeping up with the changes on that front as well. And I guess as letting agents, CPD or professional development and learning is something that has to happen versus a landlord who may hear about it in the news and not really understand what they need to do. Yeah,
exactly. So for here in Wales, we've had Rent Smart Wales for 10 years now. So on the 23rd of November, that date is etched in my brain. It'll be the 10-year anniversary of Rent Smart Wales. So the requirement for a landlord license is that landlords and letting agents do have to do annual CPD for their renewal, or they have to do the training day again, hopefully with me. And so you've got that requirement for consistent learning, more so for letting agents, because there are so many other things that we need to be looking out for and developing our systems and processes. Then on the 1st of December 2022, we had the Renting Homes Wales Act 2016. So it took a long time for it to come forward. So for Welsh landlords, we've had a huge upheaval of legislation to have to work out what is the legislation, what it is we have to do, and then how are we going to do it. And now, yes, England are going to have the Renters' Rights Bill coming in, probably, I think, sometime over the summer, if not after. But yeah, it's all a bit up in the air and things are changing. So that just adds another layer of confusion for people who aren't in, reading industry press, like I do every morning, speaking to people on the ground, speaking to Rent Smart Wales, speaking to legal professional people who, again, assist us with our contracts and things like that and get their opinions on things. So we're having these conversations constantly, but landlords on the ground aren't hearing it. They're hearing it in the press. And there is no definition between, where you read your news from a newspaper or online. It doesn't differentiate between England and Wales. And the Renters' Rights Bill is going to be England only predominantly, but there is going to be some impact for landlords in Wales, and nobody's really talking about that. Yeah, I've done a couple of blogs about it to be aware of, but until they actually finalise exactly what is going to be changing, we can't really make any plans. But that's fine. We'll have some notice, and then I'll be all over Facebook again telling everyone, this is what you need to do and this is how you do it. So nobody needs to kind of stress about it. I'll be out there shouting about it when we know what's exactly happening. So yeah, there have been a lot of changes, and keeping up to date with them is really paramount, being a landlord, to protect yourself. I think that's the key thing, that if you don't do the how-to properly, so you kind of understand the legislation, you didn't quite get it, but you kind of got it, but then you did the execution wrong, it doesn't matter, you're then non-compliant. And unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing a lot now, 2.5 years after the Renting Homes Act, are self-managing landlords who thought they were doing the right thing. And these are good and decent people who, on the whole, have always been compliant. That's their thing. They take pride in what they do. They're good people. They're good landlords, but they just misunderstood the conversion process, and they haven't converted their tenancies into occupation contracts correctly. And yeah, I'm kind of working with them now to kind of get them back up to speed. We're 2.5 years in. I think that dependent on what the English legislation is going to be, it could well be the same again. It's just a lot of information for people to take in and execute correctly. So it is a huge challenge to do it as a letting agent and be compliant, and then also educate your landlords as to what they need to be doing and that you're going to be doing on their behalf. And then those self-managing landlords who don't have a letting agent, at the drop of a hat to pick up a phone and say, I just don't understand why I have to do this, they're having to figure it out on their own. So it is it's a really big challenge, and we want to keep those good landlords in the market. That's the bottom line. We do not want landlords to be exiting the market because of confusing and complicated legislation.
Yeah, no, and I think what the main point there as well is that ultimately these are good people who, and I've read numerous reports and landlords' sentiment and what have you in the marketplace. And fundamentally, most landlords just want to provide high quality housing for their tenants and have a relationship as such that, the relationship is balanced in terms of power. So, we tenants have their rights, landlords have their rights, people behave accordingly, look after my property. You can stay in there as long as you like, as long as you pay the required rent and what have you. In fact, many landlords have inadvertently shot themselves in the foot a little by not reviewing rents because they're looking after, or in their view, looking after the tenant, which actually is counterproductive because it can lock them into a property that's unaffordable if they would ever need to, if the landlord needed to sell that property for legitimate reasons and they've been living in a 4-bed detached house for £500 a month because they haven't had the rent increased in 10 years, then that's quite the bumpy ride when you got to go and find somewhere else that's now £1,200 a month and so on. So, yeah, I think, good landlords absolutely sometimes, as I say, are guilty of doing trying to do the right thing, but actually inadvertently not doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, as a letting agent, we had processes for everything, and rent reviews was one of the things that we did upon like renewal of contract. And the Renting Homes Act actually brought a new process in where you can't increase the rent within a 12-month period. We were like, well, we're going to now review the rent every 12 months, regardless if it's periodic or if we're going into renewal. So we actually upped the emphasis on let's review the rent on every single contract every 12 months, because the legislation says we can't do something. So we're going to find the workaround for our clients. So my point is actually you can be more profitable with a letting agent because they're going to be doing the annual rent increases, or at least a review. Let's have a conversation about it. But 9 times out of 10, we did an increase, which actually meant then that those landlords who hadn't done a rent increase for 3 years are self-managing when they could have the same amount of profit with free management, essentially, because we've done the rent increases incrementally, £25, £30 maybe, every single year. So yeah, I think if there was going to be any takeaways from this, and then I'm sure there's going to be a few more, but everyone, please review your rents.
Yeah. And you're not doing the tenant any favors, especially so if we look back, interest rates and mortgages, obviously brokers. So we look at it from this standpoint. So many landlords, when Liz Truss made her autumn statement nearly 3 years ago now, possibly more, can't remember. Anyway, 3 years ago, let's say, interest rates were historically low. We were used to 3.5% as a rate and so on. They rarely moved, so therefore the rental income didn't need to move. When you wanted to remortgage, it was all fine, etc. Rates shot through the roof. And then we found ourselves in a position where these mortgages were no longer affordable based on the rents, and therefore trying to do a 25% increase in rent on a monthly basis. It's difficult for any tenant, anybody. If your mortgage went up by 25%, you'll feel it. So these incremental changes are far better to allow you to absorb and get used to that new norm, if you like, and then move into the next new norm. Because we all know what it's like. Disposable income, we'll find a use for it 9 out of 10 times. If your salary goes up, you all of a sudden find a use for that. And then in 6 months' time, that's no longer your base norm. So, that's something I think that's key.
Yeah. And I think outside of kind of lettings and legislation and all that, at our core, as being kind of British people, we just don't like talking about money, and profit is bad. And, we're talked about as money grabbing landlords because we're charging rent, but we're not doing rent increases. So we're stuck in this kind of halfway place of, but I haven't done a rent increase because I'm a good person. But everyone's telling me that I'm a bad person because I'm asking for money. But you're in business. This is a business situation. You are borrowing money to fund an investment, and you are receiving money to pay off that loan, or you've got that money coming in as additional income. That is a business, and you need to be profitable. You need to be savvy about what you're doing, or let somebody else do it for you. I have no interest whatsoever in stocks and shares. Do you know what? I get my financial advisor to do it for me. It is boring. It is not my bag. I want to do property and fun stuff and refurbs and compliance and fun stuff like I don't want to do stocks and shares, but understand it's an important part of my investment portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So, landlords need to get braver, take a deep breath, and just send out that RHW12 rent increase 2 months in a periodic contract. Be brave and do it. You are in business, and you should treat your property as such.
Well, it's sustainability, isn't it? There'll be a lack of commercial viability going forward if you aren't making these decisions. They're not necessarily tough decisions. They're fair on both parties, as I say. If you're in a position where it's no longer commercially viable and you have to sell the property, that tenant's now got to go and find a similar property at double the rent, or something of that nature.
Yeah, and you've lost a potentially great investment that you could have kept for the next 10, 15 years. generating not just income, but capital appreciation as well, capital growth. Like, always have a chat with some experts, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So you spoke about the Renting Homes Act, which came in 2.5 years ago. Do you just want to go back to that and just explain what the Renting Homes Act is and what it actually did for landlords in Wales? For landlords in Wales.
So I'm going to keep this really quite basic. So
thank you.
A lot of legal people like to go all like swishy with their lingo, but let's just keep it really basic. So before the 1st of December 2022, we had short-hold tenancy agreements, ASTs. We had housing acts and Section 8 notices, Section 21 notices, and they were all entwined in hundreds of years worth of housing legislation, and it was all a bit of a mess. So essentially what the Welsh Government decided to do, because they have devolved powers with housing, is press the delete button on the whole lot, right? So no housing acts, no ASTs, nada. They've replaced that with occupation contracts. So they're not tenancies, so we don't have tenants. We have contracts and we have contract holders. These are contracts that then apply with the Consumer Rights Act. And the second part of it then was the Fitness for Human Habitation Act. So firstly, all of our terminology has changed because our contracts have changed. And then secondly, the safety standards, in essence, of our rental properties needed to be raised. Kind of in line with HMO properties. They were already there. But for residential properties, we're now talking about having carbon monoxide alarms in any room that has a fuel burning appliance, mains wired and interlinked smoke alarms. Again, this is Wales only. It's different smoke alarms in England. And a satisfactory EICR, electrical safety certificate. And to be clear, not an EIC, it's an EICR. Again, very different to England. So, the delete button was pressed. And on the 1st of December, we were told, don't worry, all your contracts will automatically convert. You don't need to do anything, but you do have to do one thing, and you have 6 months to do it. You need to formally convert your short-hold tenancy agreements to occupation contracts. And that's when everything kind of melted into a puddle. Because everyone was like, how? And Rent Smart Wales are like, we have guidance on our website. Great. You have to go line by line through your short-hold tenancy agreement and check it against these new occupation contract fundamental and supplementary terms. And my mind just went, nope. And if my mind went, nope, I think every landlord in Wales went, what? So anyway, long story short, in collaboration with a firm who does contracts and legal statements and things like that, they've found a way to get around it. We supported landlords with a universal written statement that did a conversion. But what we're still seeing is landlords still being confused. There was a lot of confusing communication coming out from various landlord associations because they were getting it wrong too. That's how complicated it came across. The solution was actually really simple. It was just not communicated clearly enough. It was the how-to that was totally missed, which was a shame because it gave landlords who thought that they could just renew into a new occupation contract and their compliance would be fine, were then told on the 11th hour, no, that's not fine. You have to go through a written statement conversion. If you want to renew the contract, that's fine, but you haven't done what you were supposed to do. And for me, personally, it was a hugely stressful time trying to convert over 160 properties and knowing that there were thousands of landlords out there also struggling and trying to help them at the same time. I probably took on too much, truth be told, but I tried anyway. I did my best. So we're 2.5 years in now. Things have settled down. I think it has had to, both Rent Smart Wales and the Renting Homes Act have raised the standards of the way that we operate as landlords and letting agents. We've had to. And I think the other good thing is that we have to have training to be a landlord or a letting agent now. Whereas England, it's still kind of like, actually, who is telling landlords how to operate and what they need to do? At least we have a framework, a statutory framework that we can follow. We have so much guidance and support online with Rent Smart Wales. However you want to moan about how slow that website is, I agree. But I have been told at source that they are upgrading it. But that aside, there is so much information on that website. I'm helping letting agents get audit ready. There's a whole process for letting agents being audited and the things that they need to have in place. But same for landlords as well, although that landlords aren't going to get audited. If you need to know about EICRs or your registration or your license, the process, it's all there. Yeah, so we have places to go that we can ask for help and support.
I think, and it comes back to that piece, isn't it? The information is there. I guess what most people want the answer to is, how does it impact me and what do I need to do, rather than reading reams of information and then trying to decipher for yourself what. And I guess that's where the failing ultimately happens, is where there's this disconnect between here's all the information, which could be pages of whatever, versus I've got one property as an accidental landlord. Just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I just want to be compliant. And that's the bit, really, isn't it? I don't want to read however many pages of stuff, which is irrelevant to me. So, and I think that's the bit, really, that's true across not just Rent Smart Wales, that's true across all of this legislation. That's true across any communication, really, that comes from legislation and government, not just in property, across business and everything else. So that's interesting. And I guess, we talk often around unintended consequences. So the intention of this is to professionalise and increase the standards for landlords and increase the quality of housing that's available for tenants. What are some of the unintended consequences then that we've seen as a direct result of the Renting Homes Act?
I mean, there has been a report published, actually, a review of Rent Smart Wales, and I think that there's a lot of reviews being done about the Renting Homes Act specifically as well. I'm not going to refer to any of that. And people can go and read those 40 odd pages themselves if they want to sort of read that. I'm just going to sort of really talk about my experience. And as a letting agent specifically, I did find that it tipped a lot of landlords over the edge, stress-wise. And as much as we tried to support them, it was just too much. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, really. A lot of landlords were accidental. That was our main kind of client base. Sort of good quality family homes, 3-bed, semi-detached family homes, around where we live, Calais, Swansea. And they were like, well, actually, we don't have the cash flow to do the smoke alarms because the unintended consequences, and just to give you an example about smoke alarms, is that some consumer units weren't able to have an additional circuit of the smoke alarms put on, even if you were spurring them off of like the landing light and the hall light. So then consumer units were needing to be upgraded at sort of £600 to £800 a pop, plus then the labour, plus then the actual smoke alarms. So you're talking maybe like, having to make those phone calls to landlords and say, I'm so sorry, I need £1,500 from you by next week. And we gave a lot of pre-warning in our communications, but still it's a shock, right? And it's a lot of money up front. So it kind of tipped a lot of landlords over the edge, and we were finding we were serving or being asked to serve. There was a small window where 2 months notice was acceptable, the RHW 17. We had that 6-month window, and we did find that there were a lot of landlords who decided in that window to serve the 2 months notice and leave. We were obviously, as a business, it was very, very stressful to to be talking to those families with children in our local schools, knowing that they were going to have to be outside of catchment potentially because there was no new stock coming in. Or the flip side was, again, with the mortgage interest rates, that because there is no cap on rents increasing, that we were having landlords saying, well, look, I need an additional £200 rent here. And so there were some very, very strange conversations, but we had to be very kind of mindful in the same instance of how this was affecting everyone, really. And the landlord ultimately has got the right to sell their property. You know, I mean, in Wales here, at least we have the no fault eviction notice, and that, touch wood, isn't going anywhere, because I don't think anyone wants any more changes. But, you know, that is happening in England. So ultimately, we said there are more landlords leaving. Rent Smart Wales data comes back to say, no, there has been a growth. There's been a growth. And we're like, where is this? The data that we're getting, we're showing that there has been I can't remember what the percentage is. I'm sorry, I should have had these percentages to hand. But, you know, it was something like 5%. But then I thought, hold on a second, what if this data isn't good data? Because they're getting the data from landlords' own Rent Smart Wales dashboard. So as a landlord, if you're going, I'm out, see you guys later, I'm not having anything to do with Rent Smart Wales, but you don't delete your property from the dashboard, it's going to remain there. So people then think that there's more properties coming in, and I just don't think. I think it's going to take at least another 5 years to see the full effect of what the Renting Homes Act has actually done to rental stock.
And I think in regards, so we're talking about existing landlords as well. So these are landlords that went through that transition period, that obviously it was a difficult time. There's arguments it was poorly handled, whatever, that it's done, you know, we'll get through it. I guess the point now is that we are seeing younger landlords or new landlords coming into the marketplace. Well, fundamentally, they know no different. So the rules are the rules as of today. You don't have the rose-tinted glasses of, when I was younger, you know, when I was in the war, that sort of thing. You know, 25 years ago, legislation was softer and so on and so forth. So I do think there is that piece that new people coming in are literally just it's business as usual for them. You know, there's nothing new to adhere to, really.
Yes, yeah. And it is quite nice training those people, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess as well, for anyone who is thinking investing in Wales who is based in England, it's really important to get their knowledge base up on the compliance side of things that we've got here that is different to England, and to really think about the future. So not just buying a property because it's cheap and it's in Wales, but thinking about EPC legislation changing in the future as well. We're just going through a renovation now and bringing it up to an EPCC, and that's been a bit mind-bending as well, because we've lost quite a lot of square footage inside the flat. Anyway, I digress. The point is, though, that anyone coming in as an investor just needs to be really on point with understanding what the legislation is around here. And again, are you going to use a managing agent because you're not based locally? Great. But understand what it is your agent must be doing for you as their client. But ultimately, if you have then the right systems and processes in place as a self-managing landlord, and you've got those, how am I going to deal with rent arrears? How am I going to deal with property visits that are now a legal requirement here in Wales? How am I going to deal with maintenance when it comes in? Because again, there's new legislation around how to handle maintenance and documenting it all. Then you have a business. And in fact, that's any business, isn't it? As a letting agency, we have processes for everything. HR, marketing, how are we going to get business in? How are we not going to, I don't know. Yeah, how are we going to do anything and make sure that it is consistent? You want to do that as a landlord as well. And if you're coming in new, what a great opportunity to go, well, this is what I'm learning, and now I'm going to process it if I'm going to self-manage it myself, or at least know enough to go to your letting agent and ask, good quality questions of them, not just how much do you charge. That's really boring. We've heard that one a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And it's a good point that you make, actually, and one that we can come on to then around actually what does the landscape in Wales actually look like for landlords. You'll see on YouTube and various different platforms around buy-to-let is dead, all of that single-let stuff. However, in Wales, properties still yield very well because of price values versus rents. So there's that. So single let is certainly viable in the right areas. I think the same is true if you look across the UK, to be fair. In your experience and talking to Welsh landlords or landlords that invest in Wales, should we say, what are you sort of seeing from them appetite-wise? Are we seeing landlords looking to grow? Are we looking them to change out of single let into what short-term lets, HMOs? What's the sort of feeling in the place for Wales?
Portfolio landlords who have been in the industry, say, for more than 10, 15, 20 years are kind of moaning about there's nothing to buy, we're not going to do it anymore. I mean, they might have been buying properties when they were like 15 grand in the early 2000s. But that said, I have heard of investors literally snapping up really good deals on flats or on houses that need renovation, that you can take it back to brick and you have the cash flow to do a renovation that lasts, your 25, 30 years. I mean, we're, as a family, still investing in properties as well when we're finding the right property that meets our investment needs.
Yeah.
So everyone has a different requirement why they're going to buy property. And I think in here was there is still so much opportunity. As you say, house prices versus rents. At one point, it got a little bit tricky, but then rents skyrocketed very quickly after COVID. I think everyone from the big cities wanted to come and live over here. So, the rents kind of just naturally went up. They hadn't gone up really in about 10 years, 10, 15 years. There wasn't any significant growth. And then it happened like this big whoosh. So now yields are coming back in very favourably, and there is affordability. There's the thing that wages here in Swansea, when we look at the average versus the average rent, there is still affordability. I mean, that gap has significantly closed since we did the data thing in 2021, but it's still there because people are still affording these rents. So, and it's a lush place to live, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm biased as well on that front.
Totally biased. But people need housing. I go back to a stat that we had back in 2021, July 2021. We were tracking how many applications we had on properties, how many requests to let the property. So not just request a viewing, like request to let. So we'd gone fully online at this point. So we were doing virtual tours, videos, got all the information out there. So basically it was an online viewing, or we would do Zoom video viewings as well. And at its absolute peak, we had 352 applications per property we had available. That's how bad it got, because nobody was moving. So there wasn't any sort of flow of stock. But it just goes to show, like, when the stock kind of stops moving, what that demand is like. And when people kind of say, I can't get hold of my letting agent, because the phones are on fire. We cannot actually do any work because we're trying to take the calls. And when we're trying to do the work, we can't take the calls. So things have calmed down a lot now. I think when I spoke to another local letting agent, they were still on about 20 to 25 applications to let per house. So the demand, and that's the point, the demand is there. When you have demand and low supply, you're going to have high rents, but you've still got so much opportunity to input into that supply and benefit from it.
Yeah. And I've been writing, as you were speaking there, around, obviously the world's a different place as a result of COVID. There's more transit. You don't have to live where you work and so on and so forth in many, many professions now. As a result of the demand being so great, because I originally wrote here, that landlords are ultimately selling a product. So you obviously try to attract the tenant, profile that you're going for, whether that be social housing, professional landlords, or whatever that may be. So you're still selling a product or a lifestyle, whichever way you want to frame that. However, given that the demand is so great, are landlords in danger of becoming complacent and going, well, I've got a queue of 30 people. Why do I need to try and sell my property, as it were, before? Are you seeing that sort of mentality coming in, or are we at danger of people becoming a bit complacent around the standard of housing that they're producing, as long as they tick the boxes, whereas less demand for the property means you have to work harder to get it occupied? What does that look like?
Again, I can only really sort of talk from personal experience and our reputation, or my reputation, for the standards that we kind of put out there. We kind of only work with the landlords who have that right mindset of, or, we do a bit of coaching with them and say, look, if you're going to buy this investment property, who is it for? And you need to do your decorating, your carpets, your kitchens to attract that market, if we can get in there early enough, obviously, before they've bought it. So I think there's always a danger with any business that people get complacent if things get easy. And as you say, if you've got 30 applicants, things could be easy. But I think there needs to be even more diligence there. You want to be going for the best possible applicants for your property.
Not just the one who's prepared to pay the most, am I right?
Not absolutely, yeah. You need to obviously be checking they are who they say they are, and they have the affordability and the credit checks come back good. Again, that's where a letting agent has got access. Just to go back to our earlier point, a letting agent's got access to getting fraud checks done and all of that through an independent company, whereas in a solo landlord, just even getting a bank statement is like, it's not going to be enough these days. So, I think in any kind of industry, there's always going to be that level of complacency. I think it's up to the individual to be responsible enough to go, well, I need to have a property that's in good condition because I want to protect my business. I want to secure good tenants who are going to treat the property well. So if I present it in a good condition, I'm going to get better applicants. I'm going to achieve more rent, hopefully less maintenance. If you put in a shoddy cheap carpet, you're going to be replacing it every 2 years. So I think it's more about the mindset of the individual in that regard. I think the savvy landlords are going to be taking the demand as an opportunity to have a better investment portfolio, but you're always going to get lazy people, right? You're always in business, in any kind of industry, people get complacent, isn't it? So I don't know.
Yeah, and I get it, and I think that comes back to something you said about 5 minutes ago. Your investment goals. So what ultimately is the objective here? Do you have are you investing for future wealth, i.e. this is going to subsidize my retirement income, et cetera, therefore I don't need the money today, I can afford to do X, I can get away with X, and so on. So it's not a cash flow that's your objective at this moment. Or some other individuals then need the cash flow today to subsidize today's living standards, and they'll have their future capital appreciation. And that probably sets the tone for what you need to create on an ongoing basis. Some people may spend less on a property because of the availability of money to put in a high quality kitchen. But as we all know, buy cheap, buy twice, and so on. So it is a difficult conundrum. How do you work that out, to map it out, because there's so many variables? But I think understanding your investment goals, what are you trying to achieve? Do the property types and the tenant profiles match your investment goals? Yes, we all want the best paying, the person who respects the property the longest and is going to stay there for the rest of their life. I mean, that's the holy grail of a tenant, right? But all of this needs to be taken into consideration when you're looking at either your first property or your 15th property. It's the same process that you need to go through. And your objectives may change.
I was just about to say that, exactly. I know ours has changed. I've said on so many occasions, I will never do this again. I'm never doing another refurb again. And here we are, mid-refurb. But yeah, you need to review every year or two, isn't it? How are the properties working? Do any maintenance issues, get ahead of them before they become a big problem? That's why doing your property visits, not only is it a requirement now, but just planning ahead. having good relationships with the contract holders to know, okay, they might be coming to the end of their contract at the university. They might be leaving to go to Bristol University next year. Okay, well, do we need to start squirreling away money now? And these are the kind of conversations that I was having with my clients and the clients who I'm kind of coaching now. Is like, well, yes, we need to sort out and tidy up your files, but what is your end goal here? Where are you going with this? Because let me help you. As you say, it's a minefield with so many different variables, but actually talking through it with a coach or a mentor can help you kind of clear through the fog and go, well, actually, we're here and right now, and this might change, but here and right now, actually, let's just focus on this, this, and this. And when we get there, we'll review again. Because God knows what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years, isn't it? With interest rates and wars and things like that. We can only deal with the information that we have now. But also not necessarily you have to do it on your own either. Have those conversations with people who can help, because it's so important for your own portfolio to maximize it, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, and there's a couple of points there really around, getting the advice, ideally not from your mate at the other end of the bar, who hasn't been on the same journey that you have. Or actually, we see scenarios where client A has had advice of client B, both in property. Client B might be 55 properties deep into their portfolio, and client A is on their third. It's a very different dynamic. And what is open to the larger portfolio landlord is not necessarily open to the person with two or one or two properties. And very often people forget about the detail that sits behind that and think, oh, well, so-and-so can do that. It's like, well, so-and-so is a very different position than you are. So trying to just stick to your own set of circumstances, what's relevant to you as an individual. Yes, if you want to get to 50 properties, that's ideal for you. And we'll put in the steps to necessarily get you there. Yes, get the mentorship of somebody who's got 50 properties, but if they're honest, they'll tell you the journey was quite different. And also the landscape in which they did it from a mortgage perspective, same day remortgages and everything else that happened pre-2008. I've seen some large portfolio landlords that used financing at 125% at all these things that were going on, which probably made, and taking nothing away from the large portfolio landlords who did it in that era, probably made the route a bit easier because the access to finance was far more abundant than it is now. So that's off the back of that. And there was another point, but I can't remember it.
Fair enough. I think I'd like to just actually go back a little bit. And you're saying about the portfolio landlords and the 50 plus landlords and the landscape of Welsh lettings. I think the landlords who have got the portfolios of 50 or even maybe 30 plus, I think they've fallen into a hole, like a net really, where they're kind of stuck with this information and being compliant. So it doesn't make financial sense to have it all under management with a letting agency, because that's more than a full-time person's wage. So what I've seen is that those portfolio landlords usually will have then employ a family member, or they might have a main business and the property is secondary, and they use their admin staff of their main business to do the admin on the properties, which again, 10, 15 years ago was kind of like, can you just order me a gas cert? We didn't have any deposit protection. We didn't really have anything apart from gas certs actually back in 2006. Whereas now it's kind of developed, and there's so much more pressure on these admin teams, and they're not necessarily aware of all the changes and exactly again with the how-tos. So yeah, again, that landscape and the advice that maybe that 50 property plus landlord would give to somebody who's just starting out is just going to be wildly different. And really, yeah, you need to be going to the professionals. And I think what's sad as well is that those landlords with the big portfolios are not getting the advice and the support that they need, because they can't use a letting agent, because they don't have the ability just to pick up the phone and go, oh, can I just ask you a quick question? And you're like, well, no, you're not a client. So it's really, really hard as a letting agent to go, well, if you want to come on managed, but as a letting agent, I don't really want you to come on managed with your 50 plus properties, because that's going to take up such a wedge of a percentage of my business that my business has then you're a risk to my business. So we want to help these people, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, so yes, there's a lot of people out there who still need a lot more help, and not everyone has all the right answers and advice to give, even if they are a seasoned landlord, for sure.
And that brings me on beautifully to where can landlords go for advice, guidance, database knowledge? What we spoke before this, that there is a load of support out there. However, I don't think people really know where that support is. So where can people actually go to find the support they need?
So if you're in Wales, I would wholeheartedly say the Rent Smart Wales website, not their phone line, because they're not allowed to give legal advice. And I think that's fair. They're telephone support on like your account. They're not legal advisors. But then when you have more of a challenging situation, the NRLA do give a lot of really good advice as well. Again, I just a little caveat to make sure that you're dealing with somebody who's really versed in the Welsh legislation, because obviously everything's really England focused at the moment. And then actually, when we talk about mental health, there is a charity called TAIPAWB, spelled TAIPAWB. They're based in Gwent, mainly for Gwent landlords, but they will help any landlord in distress. And I got connected with them because I was just so thankful and grateful, actually, that there is a community out there, a charity specifically supporting landlords and landlords' own mental health. So it is a stressful and isolating business. It can be. To know that if you have a tenant who's going through mental health issues themselves and it's affecting your mental health, that you have somewhere to go. So definitely pick up the phone or Google them. I will obviously say that I do consultancy work for landlords and letting agents as well. So I can help on a one-to-one basis. Website still pending for...
And where can we find you?
So I'd say LinkedIn, Hannah McCartan. You can drop me a direct message on there. And my email address will be in the show comments. Show notes. That's it at the end as well. So you can book in through a Calendly link to come and have a chat, and I can just assess then whether or not I can help you or signpost you to somewhere else. I just feel like there needs to be more kind of one-to-one help and support with landlords. I've tried to do a blanket, let's help everyone, but everyone has such different needs or questions even, and they're so unique to their circumstances that I felt that the one-to-one way for the moment is helping more people, and then if necessary then going into a 6-month sort of let's actually dig deep into your files and let's get you properly sorted. So I can do that, but there's lots of other landlord forums out there. My one thing I would say, please don't take advice from Facebook, because there's some wild things going on there. I'm trying to be as active as I possibly can without going into a 2-hour Facebook hole, forgetting, that I should be working. To try and kind of put the record straight with things. So just be really mindful that, put a question out on the Facebook groups, but please be signposted to professional bodies. And get it right.
Absolutely. And I'm quite mindful as well that obviously we've spoken a lot about Wales, Rent Smart Wales, Rent Homes Act, all the challenges, etc. But I think, we're coming to the end of the podcast now. I think we need to end on more positivity around renting in Wales, being a landlord in Wales. There is still stock out there. It's high yielding stock without it having to be a complicated HMO multi-unit freehold block of flats and these sorts of things. Simple still works very much so in Wales if you're actively seeking to get into the space. I had a conversation with someone over the weekend who was sort of early 20s, and they were like, "Oh, now's not a good time to get into property." I'm like, "Now's as good a time as any, and you need to get
20s.
yourself educated."
Yes, wow. Yeah. I bought my first place in my early 20s. And I just think if you can get into property as early as you can, because you're going to have that compound effect, aren't you, of capital appreciation. And But get the right price.
Yeah, 100%. And the key message to him was, look, go and get yourself educated, whether it's invest some time on YouTube videos, just get the fundamentals, a basic knowledge of what you're doing before you just start putting cash into stuff. Although I know plenty of people who started that way as well, and they seem to be doing okay as well. So you kind of learn on the job, right? But that's an expensive education in itself. So
yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think... from off that, as I say, just to end on the part that Wales is still a great place to invest. Actually, I think Rent Smart Wales is not a bad thing. It's quite prescribed what you have to do. Therefore, just follow the guidance and the legislation, and you'll do hard to go wrong. If you're struggling, come and speak to the likes of yourselves, your letting agent, or seek some professional help. The NRLA, as you say, the BLA, they're still a thing.
Not sure.
British, there's certainly a website.
Or maybe.
And British Landlords Association.
Yeah, maybe. Not one I'm so familiar with, but I know there's quite a few different places out there. Just if you're in Wales, just make sure that it's specific to Wales when you get your advice. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think in Wales, we should look at Rent Smart Wales as a positive. Okay, it might be a bit more headwork, but it's a good thing because the standard of letting has raised here in Wales. We have got places to go to get training, be better landlords. And the majority of landlords I work with are, as we've said before, good people who strive to be professional, who are professional, who just need that little bit of extra care and support with their processes and to make sure that they are fully compliant. But on the whole, it is a positive thing because we're creating so many good quality homes for contract holders to live in, and it's benefiting landlords as well when they get it right.
Yeah, that's the key, when they get it right. So, and I think on that note, we shall end. So Hannah, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak to us this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Great conversation. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.